Hi, I'm here to address the vinyl community. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm just going to read a little bit of this book, Obstruction of Justice. Just as Bugliosi believers asked why none of the defendants facing the gas chamber mentioned that the terror at Cielo Drive was motivated by drug dealing, even though Atkins explicitly said so in a statement that garnered some press attention at the time, they also wondered why none of the lawyers for the defense publicly brought up the narcotics angle if there was anything to do to it. Again, one of the beleaguered bunch, Patricia Quenwrinkle's attorney, Paul Fitzgerald, the most competent and ethical of the sorry lot on the defense team, did just that. Not only did he specifically raise the drug dealing element as being central to the case, Fitzgerald also seemed to reason to believe, as Charlie later confirmed, that unknown others were involved. On May 2nd, 1970, shortly before the trial proper started, Mary Neuswender, Neiswender, the only member of the Los Angeles Press Corps on friendly contact with Charles, reportedly in a syndicated article that Fitzgerald charged police and district attorney investigators were intentionally covering up the possibility that someone other than hippie leader Charles Manson and the family killed Sharon Tate and 6 others. Fitzgerald made the charges in a formal motion in which he said prosecutors were in contempt of court for not allowing him to see evidence that they had gathered in the case, although he said they had been ordered to do so. He was concerned that photographs of the bloody heel print found immediately outside the door of the Cielo Drive address, the Tate home, may demonstrate that some persons other than the defendants were present on or about the time of death and were therefore deliberately withheld from him. Watson, Krenwinkel, Atkins, and Kasabian were believed to be barefoot and wearing moccasins at the time of the killings. The presence of that heel print has still never been adequately explained. The mystery made murkier now that we know about at least 4 persons not directly involved with the murder per se, were their aftertext left his horrid handiwork, but before Winifred Chapman, the Polanski's maid, arrived for work. And then we must face into the vexing variables that still unknown partners who tagged along on Charlie's evidence tampering visit on the crime scene, tending to support Charlie's later claim that other non-spawn personnels were enmeshed in the mess. Fitzgerald accused prosecutors Bugliosi, Kay, and Stovich of withholding from him theories still held by qualified, experienced homicide detectives, also to hired killers. Why they believe in the theory the attorneys contend is vital to the case. Fitzgerald, to his credit, was the only lawyer to note the obvious relevance of the peculiar, bizarre, and unusual fashion in which the rope tying Tate to her former fiancé, Sebring, was fastened to the victims he identified as ladies' man Sebring, who was well known for his habit of taking numerous women to his residence, where he would tie up the women with a small sash cord, and if they agreed, whip them, after which he would address them and have sexual relations. Fitzgerald accused Bugliosi and his staff of refusing to take available copies of evidence they had gathered during their investigation of Sebring's bizarre sexual activity and his use of force to torture as connection with ropes and hoods. Did Krenwinkel reveal in her client confidentiality protected discussions with her attorney that one factor in the killings involved Sebring playing unwelcome sadomasochistic sexual games with some of the girls in the commune? Charles hinted many times that if the public knew what the victims had done, The dynamics of the dispute above and beyond the ripoff of the drug burn would have been obvious, as well as touching to the taboo of how Sebring's kinks may have influenced the way he and Sharon died. Fitzgerald also included in his motion under an open secret. Sebring was a well-known user of cocaine, staying high on the drug most of the time. Fitzgerald was quite justified in stating, for the record, the big part narcotics played in the lives of the victims also has been underplayed by investigators, who have refused to give defense attorneys needed and court-ordered information. Without naming her, Fitzgerald included in the motion the fact that on the day before the murders, Charlene McCaffrey, Sebring's receptionist and Joel Rostow's lover, had talked to Sebring, and he had informed her that he had been burnt on a $2,000 worth of cocaine and would do almost anything to get back at the person who had burned him. While Sebring associated with any number of unreliable dealers, we can't yet rule out the possibility that Watson, known for his treacherous transactions, may well have been treacherous pusher who burnt the hairdresser. Watson's rep as a set-off artist preceding him, it would have been just like him to self-righteously avenge himself on someone he already betrayed. Effectively summing up the true core of the crime's genesis in a manner that nothing said at the actual trial ever did, Fitzgerald's motion on the court cited a partial statement from an unnamed source, including who said to Frykowski, used cocaine, mescaline, LSD, marijuana, hashish, and MDA in large amounts. He was an extrovert and gave invitations to almost everyone he met to come visit him at the resident's Cielo Drive address. Narcotics parties were the order of the day, and the parties continued on into the early morning hours. Fitzgerald was wanted to see a particularly withheld statement from a witness who was told that it was Abigail Folger who was supplying Frykowski with money for his drug habit. This witness also reported that Folger used the same drugs Frykowski abused in large quantities. A few other mainstream news articles prior to her post-December 1969 sanctification openly discussed Folger's own heavy cocaine use while she was staying at Cielo Drive. The defense attorney specifically noted to know more about Tommy Harrigan visiting Frykowski at Cielo Drive between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. on August 8th concerning a delivery of MDA in the near future, a little detail that was prosecution delicately sidestepped in court. Fitzgerald also made public this extremely relevant information that he knew the prosecution refused to share its totality with him. Qualified open homicide investigators in the Los Angeles Police Department earnestly held to the theory that one or two persons delivering or collecting for a delivery of various types and amounts of narcotics were turned away empty-handed due to either bad narcotics or a lack of cash funds, and that they decided to take both the money and the narcotics after killing the victims. Everyone at the time of the murders were terror-stricken and said many things. Now they decided to stop talking. Those early statements were vital. Those who glibly dismiss any talk to the victim's drug dealing as malicious rumor refuse to take into account that at the trial were based on the suppressed evidence of narcotics trafficking that the LAPD investigators discovered. Bugliosi's ridiculous race war scenario would have been at the flimsy fiction it is. Whether the defendants were understood by the jury to be routine crooks stealing drugs and money that they actually were, or the bloodthirsty cult robots with no mind of their own Bugliosi presented them as, they would have still been judged to be just as guilty of murder. And yet some primal tribal impulse in the collective consciousness seems to send these critiques to be something more uncanny than typical drug-related violence. Fitzgerald added, an additional theory existed that he suspects were hired killers. If, as Charlie insinuated, others were involved in instigating and profiting from the mayhem of the Polanski residence, Fitzgerald were right to suspect that the prosecution were hiding something from him. Charlie consistently claimed that Bliosi's main task, along with the obvious one of protecting the swollen egos and whitewashed reputations of healthy entertainment figures, was distracting from the high-level criminals whose guilt a proper trial based on fiction rather than fact would have exposed. Despite the motion Fitzgerald moved, none of the essential pertinent points he raised surfaced in court, with the exception of Atkins' roundly neglected spontaneous statement that Kasabian went to Cielo Drive to avenge an MDA burn with a robbery. One crucial point when it comes to the defense team's decision not to introduce evidence concerning the victim's drug dealing onto the proceedings must be clarified before we sink into the morass of the murder. California law in 69 stipulates that homicides committed during the commission of another felony, a drug robbery, for instance, guaranteed an authentic death penalty. If you wonder why those accused all too gladly played the roles of a cult leader, obedient slaves, instead of telling the prosaic truth, well, the threat of the gas chamber works wonders in that way. Trying in vain to convince him to be more forthcoming, I pointed out to Charlie that despite his no-snitch code, he repeatedly named his former prison mentor and gangster associate, Frankie Carbo, and one of the beneficiaries of the La Bianca murder trial, of the murder. Charlie had already acknowledged to me that he personally handled the cash robbed from the La Biancas and paid it to the straight Slaytons in Venice. Why, I asked him, could he speak openly about the involvement of Carbo and the bikers in the La Bianca mayhem and yet be circumspect about the still unknown hidden hand he consistently put obliquely referred in regards to Cielo Drive. He replied that I had less to say about Cielo because that was Tex's trip, not mine, an implicit admission, it seemed to me, that he did bear some responsibility for the second night. Along with a long, thoughtful pause, he added, I have been stirring duck in here. They are smarter than me, man. I have been played a fool. They were there. Despite Charlie's residence, despite the efficacy of his connection cover-ups, we can still discern revealing patterns and connections by sounding the depths of the murky underworld abyss in which the Cielo Waverly Acuna lay buried. And the next thing I would like to read is called Buried in the Back Pages, which talks about partners in crime. I mean, there's so many partners in crime, you can't even begin. Massaro, Apintas, the Flagman, the Friars Club, Frankie Carbo, Rostow. Why was Fatowski whipping Pick Dawson when Abigail Folger's best friend was Mama Cass and her fiance was Pick Dawson's associate? Have a nice day, and we'll hopefully read this out again one day.